Okay, good day to everyone. So for this video lecture, I'm going to talk about the um, feeds and feeding on the Carabao production. So particularly, I'm going to talk about the different feed resources that the Philippine that are available in the Philippines na pwede nating ipakain sa ating mga Carabao. So for an introduction, so when we say yung ruminant production in the Philippines depends on the farm enterprise, the size of which is continuously declining. So yung ating ruminant production, nakadepende yan kung ano yung type ng production system or yung farm enterprise. So like for example, nakadepende yan if it is a backyard production, if it is a feedlot operation, if it is a dairy milk production. So, nakadepende yan. And then, yung size ng mga farm enterprise na yun, it is continuously declining. Pero may mga efforts pa rin na ginagawa yung government, um, especially on the Carabao part, particularly on the milk production niya. So, you have the PCC that continuously are researching. May mga ginagawa silang program in order to produce more milk in order to produce a Carabao breed, a hybrid Carabao that can produce milk. So, yun yung ginagawa. Pero it is continuously declining pa rin. Especially dun sa ibang ruminant production, dun sa beef cattle, sa mga goat natin, sa sheep, mostly are backyard na talaga. So, ruminants are mostly housed or graze on native pasture either through tethering or grazing. So, yun yung mostly ginagawa sa ruminants. Including na yung Carabao. So, mostly are housed on graze or native pasture either through tethering, yung nakagalot, or by grazing, yung nag-graze sila. Pero most of the time, it is tethering. Yung nakagalot lang. So, parang ganito lang yung housing for mga Carabao natin, especially in backyard production. So, may silong lang and then nandun yung Carabao. So, dun then may parang feeding trough ka kung saan doon mo ilalagay yung mga forage nila. So, yun yung ginagawa mostly. So, forage are cut and offered to the animal doon sa Carabao. So, yun yung isang ginagawa nila. So, as you can see on the picture, so yun yung mga napier, kinakat and carry nila and then ino-offer nila doon sa Carabao. So, Carabaos are generally supplemented with fibrous crop residues and other byproducts. So, yun. Aside from the forages and roughages that that the farmers are cutting and offering to the Carabao, yung Carabao binibigyan rin nila ng mga fibrous crop residues na tinatawag. So ano nga ba tong mga fibrous crop residues na to? So we have the straws, rice straw. So mga crop residue yun, binibigay nila dun sa Carabao. As well as yung mga corn stover na tinatawag. So that is considered a crop residue, pwede mong ibigay doon sa Carabao. And when we say other byproducts from other crops, like yung sa sugarcane tops, mga ganun. So, pwede mong isupplement, pwede mong ibigay, additional na pwedeng kainin ng Carabao. So, itong mga fibrous crop residues and other byproducts, other farm byproducts, these are usually given during yung lean month or yung lean grazing period na tinatawag, which is commonly on November to May. So, yun. So, ration formulation procedures are rarely used by both the ranchers and the smallholders. So, you have the cut and carry system wherein you provide forage and roughages, and then you supplement it with mga byproducts. yung mga farm byproducts. And then you also have ration formulation, which is rarely used or hardly even used. Walang masyadong gumagamit ng ration formulation by both the ranchers and the smallholders. So kahit man na marami kang Carabao dyan, kahit malaki yung farm mo, or yung backyard operation lang, uncommon na, rare na nagpa-practice sila ng ration formulation na tinatawag. Since here in the Philippines, there are no feedlot for Carabao fattening. Wala ka namang makikitang mga ganun, yung mga parang sa beef cattle, na may mga feedlot operation na tinatawag. For Carabao, mostly are backyard operation. And when may mga rancho ka, mga ranches na kang makikita kung saan may mga Carabao, mostly are mga hybrid na, which is mostly for milk production na. So, hindi ko lang sure or hindi pa ako updated if there are feedlot operation for Carabao. Since to my knowledge parang wala pa, so those are the reasons why wala pa masyadong nagpa-practice or rarely na may nagpa-practice ng ration formulation. So, native grasses growing from permanent pastures. So now we go to the feed resources na tinatawag. So, yung mga feed resources pwedeng dun sa mga native grasses that grows from the permanent pastures, kung saan mo pinapastor yung mga Carabao mo, yung mga unclassified land na tinatawag, yung hindi for agricultural, hindi for forest, basta unclassified siya, na pwedeng pagkuhanan ng mga pasture, pwede rin doon, or mga feed resources, pwede rin doon. And then forest areas are the most important feed resources for Carabao. So yun, yung mga tumutubo daw dito sa mga part na to, sa permanent pasture, doon sa unclassified land na tinatawag, and then doon sa mga forest area, yung mga tumutubong grasses doon, yun yung mga, are the most important na feed resources for Carabao. So mostly ganun talaga yung ginagawa. Tinetether nila doon sa pastures, tinetether nila doon sa kahit saan na land, kahit unclassified man yan, basta may mga makain silang mga grasses, pwede na yun. Especially on backyard operation. Ganun yung ginagawa. So, the main food crops include yung rice, sugarcane, cassava, sweet potatoes, and other plantation crops such as coconut and banana. So, large quantities of these mga fibrous crop na to, residues, are provided by land use for yung food and cash crops, yung mga rice, sugarcane, cassava, yung mga farm byproducts nila, yung mga byproducts nila, yun yung mostly ibinibigay doon sa Carabao. Like, yung rice straw, yung sugarcane top, cassava top, yung mga ganun, pwedeng ibigay. Then, pwede rin yung coconut and banana. So, feed grains like corn and sorghum are also important feeds. So, pwede rin yung mga corn natin at saka yung sorghum natin. Especially yung mga byproducts nila, pwede mong ipakain doon sa animal. So, when we say grazing naman, this is also practiced by the sa Carabao production. So, the Philippines has about 1.2 million hectares of permanent pastures daw. So, ganun kalawak, 1.2 million hectares. So, this 1.2 million hectares, it will provide a major part of ravage intake doon sa animal. Kasi nga, ang lawak, so maraming available na forage, maraming available na ravage na pwedeng kainin ng yung Carabao. So, taking into estimate of 0.8 tons dry matter yield per hectare. So, ganun daw yung yield niya ng dry matter doon sa forage and ravages. So, 0.8 tons dry matter yield per hectare per year. So the pastures can produce about 1 million tons dry matters per year para masupply mo yung 80% dry matter requirement of 2.8 million Carabaos. So yun. So with the 1.2 million hectares daw, makakapag-produce ka ngayon ng 1 million tons dry matter. Per year yan. Para masupply mo yung 2.8 million Carabao. So, this is like yung, this scenario, itong scenario na to, na makakasupply ka ng 2.8 million Carabaos, na makakapag-produce ka ng 1 million tons dry matter. This is when the scenario is perfect. Lahat na maganda yung yield ng mga pastures and roughages natin, maganda yung management, and then pag ganun na maganda yung management, yung pagpapatubo ng mga roughages and mga pastures natin, then you could produce itong 1 million tons of dry matter per year. Pero that is not the case. Kasi marami pa rin itong sinasabi niya na permanent pasture, yung 1.2 million hectare of permanent pasture, most of these are walang nagmamanage. So pag walang nagmamanage, then hindi mo talaga ma-maximize yung production potential ng mga forages and roughages na nandun kasi nga walang nagmamanage. So itong 1 million tons talagang on perfect lang. Pag perfect management, kung maganda yung management on all of the 1.2 million hectares. So yun. Pero theoretically, kaya niyang mag-produce ng 1 million tons of dry matter para ma-supply yung dry matter requirement ng 2.8 million Carabaos. So, additional potential forage resources comes from 11 million hectares of forest which can supply an additional 8 million tons of dry matter. So, aside from the permanent pasture area na tinatawag natin, meron na rin itong forest area which has like 11 million hectares na pwedeng pagkuhanan ng mga forage resources natin, which can supply an additional 8 million tons dry matter, theoretically. Kung maganda yung tubo, kung maganda yung growth ng mga forage resources natin, then you can you can produce 8 million tons of dry matter. However, the carrying capacity of pastures in the Philippines is low. So, mababa daw yung carrying capacity natin. So, when we say carrying capacity, it is a measurement. Pwedeng estimated or actual, basta measurement on how much forage a unit or piece of ground is able to produce on an average year. So, yun yung carrying capacity na tinatawag. Kung ilang amount ng forage yung a certain land or ground can produce in a year. So, yun yung carrying capacity. Now, yung problem natin is yung carrying capacity of pasture in the Philippines is low. Kaya, this is a stretch. Medyo wishful thinking na medyo nangangarap na tayo. Pero, theoretically talaga, pwede ito. 8 million tons of dry matter. Pero since yung carrying capacity natin, yung ability ng ground, ng land to produce forages is low, then hindi na ma-maximize, hindi na-meet yung nutrient, mostly hindi na-meet talaga yung nutrient requirements on all, yung dry matter requirement on all of the Carabaos here in the Philippines. So yun, that's for grazing. Now, we go to yung fibrous crop residues na tinatawag. So, in addition to grazing, Carabaos are fed rice straw, stubbles, and other crop byproducts. So yun, in addition doon sa pag-tether mo, sa pag-graze mo, yung mga Carabao natin, binibigyan rin natin ng mga crop residues na tinatawag. So, it is estimated that the total roughage available for grazing and crop residue is around 34 million tons dry matter per year. So, ganun karami yung grazing and crop residue ravages that is available, 34 million tons dry matter. So assuming that yung per year is yung kailangan ng isang Carabao is nasa 3 tons dry matter, this could parang support 11 million large ruminant. So, ganun karami yung pwede mong i-support na ruminant. Pero, these mga calculations na to, you assume that yung feed of suitable quality is available and throughout the year and that all of the forages are available and accessible. Para yung 34 million tons per dry matter mo is masusuplayan niya yung dry matter requirement ng 11 million large ruminants including yung Carabao. Kailangan na yung feed is as maganda yung quality and then available siya throughout the year and then yung mga forages natin are available and accessible, then you can supply yung sinasabi nating 11 million. Pero that is not the case. So, kulang. Medyo hindi natutuunan ng pansin yung forage establishment, mga ganun natin. So, the quality of most fibrous crops in the region is low and the animals are barely above maintenance. So, yun yung truth. So, theoretically, sabi ko nga, yung 34 million tons dry matter, it can supply yung dry matter requirement ng 11 million large ruminant, pero yung quality ng mga most fibrous crops natin dito sa region, dito sa bansa, it is low. So when we say yung quality ng mga forage crop natin low, then yung nutrient requirement nila hindi ganun kaganda, hindi masyadong of high quality. So yung reality, hindi masusuplayan talaga yung requirement niya, yung nutrient requirement niya. And then with that, the animals are barely above maintenance na tinatawag. So in this table, makikita natin yung potential availability of crop residues in the Philippines from some cereals and food crops. So you have rice straw. So yung yield niya nasa 9,459 tons of rice straw. And then yung extraction rate, when we say extraction rate, yung plant extraction, it is a process that aims to extract yung certain components that is present in the plant. So in rice, you have yung rice straw na tinatawag. So yung extraction rate niya nasa 100%. So pwede mong ma-extract lahat ito. So yung availability niya, same with the yield or same with the na-produce. Kasi 100% yung extraction rate. So nasa 9,459 tons. So with the maize stover naman doon sa corn. So for 4,522, yung extraction rate niya nasa 200%. So nadoble. So yung availability twice as much as the yield. So 9,044. Then dito naman sa cassava leaves, you have yung yield niya nasa 1,847. But yung extraction rate niya medyo mababa, nasa 6% lang. So yung 6% of 1,847, 115 lang yung available na pwede mong ipakain So, all of these, mga rice straw, corn stover, cassava leaves, peanut leaves, itong mga pulses leaves, mga sugarcane bagasse, sugarcane tops, soya bean, these are all, itong mga to are mga crop residues na tinatawag, fibrous crop residues. So, another one, itong sugarcane bagasse na tinatawag, nasa 17,591. Pero yung extraction rate lang niya is nasa 12%. So, yung available lang nasa 3,518. So, ganun yung mga potential availability of crop residues, of some of the crop residues in the Philippines. So, aside from the crop residues, meron rin tayo nitong concentrate. Pero, not so common na pinapakain doon sa mga ruminants natin. Pero, pwede rin as para ma-meet yung nutrient requirement ng mga animal natin. Binibigyan rin natin ng mga concentrate. So, corn and other grains are mostly used for the production of non-ruminants, but limited quantities are used for Carabao production. So yun, most of the grains kasi, yung mga concentrate, mostly are napupunta doon sa pagpapakain natin ng mga manok at saka yung mga baboy natin, yung mga monogastric natin. Pero some of the corn and other grains, mga concentrate natin, are some of those, but in limited quantity lamang, ay ginagamit natin for Carabao production. So, you also have yung mga milling byproducts such as brands, oil cakes, and non-conventional byproducts are available for Carabao feeding. So, again, with the table, you have yung potential supply of some concentrate feedstuff in the Philippines. So, you have yung rice bran from rice with a yield of 9,459. Pero yung extraction rate lang niya, yung pwede mong makuhang rice bran, nasa 20% lang. So, yung available or quantity na pwede mong ma-extract is nasa 1,892. So, we also have here yung sugarcane molasses na tinatawag. So, it has, yung yield niya ng sugarcane nasa 17,591. Pero yung extraction rate mo lang is 4%. So, mababa yung extraction rate. So, yung quantity ng sugarcane molasses na pwedeng ibigay or na-extract mo is nasa 703 lamang. So, itong mga concentrate na to, ito yung mga available or common feedstuff, concentrate feedstuff na pwedeng ibigay doon sa Carabao, pero hindi common. So, you have yung rice bran, yung broken rice na tinatawag, corn grain, cassava dried chips, sugarcane molasses. You also have yung mga oil cake, cottonseed oil cake, yung mga coconut meat oil residue, peanut kernel oil residue, at saka mga soybean meal. So, yun yung mga concentrate. Examples of concentrates natin. So, with that, those are the feed resources na tinatawag. Mga kung saan galing yung ipapakain natin. So, in feeding system naman, there are different feeding system in various regions of the country. So, sa different regions in the country, may iba't ibang pamamaraan sila, may mga iba't ibang feeding system nila para sa pagpapakain ng ating mga Carabao. So, like for example, in Central Luzon, during dry season, 35% dry matter is supplied through grazing daw, and then 10% through yung crop residues, yung straw, rice straw, and then 4% through yung shrubs natin, and then 1% through other components. So, yun yung parang division, mga percentage nila sa pagpapakain ng Carabao nila during dry season. So, most of this nasa dry matter daw. Yung 35% dry matter is supplied through mostly sa grazing. And then 10% through straw, yung mga crop residues. Then, after the harvest, carabaos are tethered on the rice stubbles left in the field. So, yun yung ginagawa mostly. So, pag nag-harvest na sila ng rice, then tinetether nila yung carabao doon sa field, doon sa nag-harvestan nila para kainin nila yung mga rice stubbles. So, that will serve as a crop residue rin na pwedeng ipakain doon sa animal. So, in Batangas naman, animals depends heavily on the forage species like yung temeda and then yung imperata na tinatawag. So, ito yung mga gine-graze nila, kinakain mostly ng mga carabao doon sa Batangas. So, in rice coconut cropping system naman in Quezon, mga imperata, cylindrica, parang ganito, paspalum, and then yung quitococum, provide yung basal roughage, yung energy roughage na kailangan ng carabao. So, mostly ito yung kinakain nila in this region of the Philippines. Then, in Central Luzon, temeda and imperata rice straw along with leguminous shrubs are fed to carabao during the dry season. So, yun. Mostly ganito. Common yung temeda and then yung imperata na kinakain ng mga carabao natin. So, in Negros naman, yung carabaos and cattles are mostly fed sugarcane tops, then supplemented with grazing or grasses, cut and carried to the Carabao. So, yun naman yung feeding system na ginagawa doon sa Negros. So, most of them, obviously, may mga sugarcane crops sila. So, yung farm byproducts na sugarcane top, pinapakain nila doon sa Carabao nila and then it is supplemented by grazing of grasses, yung mga temeda natin, mga imperata, and then also they are cut. Pinapractice rin nila yung cut and carry system na tinatawag. So, conservation of grasses and fodders by silage making, hay making, and artificial drying are not practiced by smallholder farmers. So, kasi ito rin yung isang feeding system na pwedeng gawin or ito yung feeding system na ine-employ rin ng mga government agencies natin, particularly sa PCC. Sa Philippine Carabao Center, pinapractice nila yung silage making na tinatawag. Pati na rin yung hay making and artificial drying since they have access to dito sa mga technology nito. They have labors, they have sufficient labors, they have sufficient funding to do this kind of conservations, to do this kind of feeding system. Pero, it is not or rarely practiced by smallholder farmers. Since kayong nabanggit ko, kailangan laborious and then kailangan ng medyo malaking capital. As you can see here, kailangan mo itong mga machines na to para makapag-practice ka nitong mga silage making, hay making na tinatawag. So, hindi pinapractice ng mga smallholder farmers. Then, the common practice of storing dried rice straw in the field near the house as supply during the dry season has been adopted by farmers. So, yun yung ginagawa nila. Pag-i-store ng mga rice straw na nanggaling dun sa pag-harvest nila ng rice, ini-store nila near the house or on the house para yun yung parang pwede nilang ipakain during yung dry season kung saan walang makain yung mga carabao na mga grasses. So, yun yung ginagawa ng mga farmers natin. So, a small percentage naman of farmers in Luzon fed their carabao with rice straw but a large portion of them burn the rice straw and let it decompose in the field. So yun, kahit sinasabi natin na, oy, pwedeng kainin, pwede nating ipakain itong rice straw doon sa Carabao natin, small percentage lang yung nagpa-practice nito dito sa Luzon. So, most of them, yung ginagawa doon sa rice straw is binaburn nila and then decompose nila in the field. Then we also have what we call as supplementary feeding na tinatawag. So there are a lot of evidence to prove that poor growth and reproductive performance of Philippine Carabao are primarily due to the lack of nutrients and imbalance ration. So yun, mostly that is the case not only in Philippine Carabao pero lahat na ng mga ruminants natin, especially when it comes to backyard production. So yung cause niya or yung main reason is yung sa lack of nutrients and then imbalance ration, which can result to poor growth and reproductive performance. So this is very common ng tulad ng sinabi ko doon sa mga village carabaos natin, doon sa mga backyard operation, wherein yung supplementation is seldom done or uncommon talaga. And then, aside from that, meron rin yung exposure ng Carabao sa stress due to yung sa heavy work and as well as yung sa lactation and underfeeding. Talagang magre-result ito ng poor growth and poor reproductive performance doon sa Philippine Carabao natin. So, with that, dapat may supplementary feeding tayo. So, one way of improving the growth, the milk production, work capacity, and reproductive performance of Carabao is by supplementation of feeds. So, especially during yung sa mga long dry seasons, when yung quality and quantity of pasture grasses go down, kung saan sa dry season wala talagang makain yung mga Carabao natin or yung quality at quantity niya mas maliit or lower compared to the other times of the year, then kailangan talaga ng supplementary feeding, supplementation by feed. So, supplementation of feed will enable the Carabao to get additional sources of more digestible nutrients other than those supplied by the usual diet. So, yun yung kailangan mong gawin, supplementation of feed, para ma-provide yung kulang na nutrient dun sa animal para maganda yung productivity ng animal. Then, feeding concentrate, ito yung mga supplementary feeding na pwedeng ibigay doon sa Carabao natin. So, you have feeding concentrate with untreated rice straw. Pwede yung urea-treated ensiled rice straw and energy supplementation on growth. Pwede rin yung rice bran and chicken manure mixture. And then, pwede rin yung legume supplementation. Pwede yung dried ipil-ipil leaves and then yung Sesbania aculata supplementation na tinatawag. So, yun yung pwedeng nating gawin. Pwedeng supplementary feeding doon sa ating mga Carabao. So, with that ends my discussion on the feeds and feeding. So, specifically or focusing on the Carabao production. So, with that, please go over the video lecture and thank you for listening.